It is time to engage. And guess what? Quarantine. Everybody's basically in lockdown on planet Earth right now. And, Trek It or Wreck It is no different. So, Powys and Vanya, thank you for joining us live via satellite. It's a very exciting time.
Anytime.
Thanks for having it.
Any global pandemic, I'm there, man.
One way or another, we can count on you guys. So we're going to basically do the episode the way we always do. We're going to go all the way through live. If one of the guys drop out, then maybe I'll just try to put them back. But so far the connections have been pretty good. So I hope it looks good. I hope it sounds good. Let's take it. It's episode 9 of Star Trek Picard. This is the second last, the penultimate episode of this first season. And it has, a bloated Latin name, which is pretty exciting. In Arcadia Ego, Part 1, which I did a little bit of Googling on this. There's a painting.
Same with me.
Yeah, there's a painting with this name, but there's actually 2 paintings by the same artist with this name.
Oh.
Yeah, and there's a slight difference between the 2 paintings where one of them, a character can see his shadow, and in the other one, he can't. So, yeah, maybe there's not just, Latin going on here, but Latin and art history. So, can't get much geekier than that. It started with a pretty pitched space battle. Vanya, how did you feel about getting a Romulan versus cargo ship versus giant Borg cube?
Yeah, I mean, that was exciting, especially with the orchids. And that's kind of a cool, fresher kind of concept, I guess. And so that was neat. But it just, it was really quick, and then it was over. You know what I mean? It wasn't so overblown, but I thought they did a good job, and it was fine.
Well, then one of the things I liked about the orchids, I got a real Encounter at Farpoint space jellyfish vibe out of it, which it was nice. It was nice because
and it also
go ahead.
It made you think of the beautiful flower thing. I was like, oh, okay. We're kind of getting into, we know about that space, and it brought us, what with Rios' story.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes. Well,
we tied it together.
And it's curious because we got to see the orchids that I guess her father tends to, like they're his children, in a very literal way, because in Soji's flashback / memory / processing of her life that her dream state winds up being, it was an opportunity for her to see metaphors for everything. And I guess her father, which is maybe Maddox, is maybe Soong, is maybe represented by both, tending orchids, seems to represent this planetary defense system and her sisters and brothers as well, which is interesting.
Did we establish whether those orchids were organic or whether they were engineered? I wasn't quite sure.
Well, yeah, they didn't really explain whether the orchids were organic or not, but assuming that they can make a bunch of synthetic butterflies, I think it's safe to assume the only non-synthetic life that has anything to do with this compound is Soong, and everything else is synthetic.
I got the feeling that the orchids were definitely synthetic, especially when she said, well, we can make more.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay, they're not organic,
And they were flying in space, which is a thing Data could do better than, say, Picard. So that makes sense. Powys, were you surprised at all to see the Borg cube come through the transwarp conduit, or was that so telegraphed that you were just counting down the minutes?
That was telegraphed before the show was ever made. It was great. I thought it was great. Borg cube comes through, and I was like, oh, here we go. We're on the road. The show is getting into adventure and discovery and a sense of awe. And I think this was the first time since the show began, I was like, oh, wow, we're actually on an adventure now. And there's that feeling of awe that was missing that I didn't quite get from episode 1 to 8. I felt that this is new territory. We're actually moving the story forward. This could have been episode 4, I felt. Episode 4 or 5.
Now,
You know.
did that sense of adventure kind of evaporate as soon as the Borg cube was snatched by orchids and smashed into the planet?
No, it was still there.
Good, good.
It was still there.
Um,
They're on a road trip, you know. This motley crew, they're starting to gel. They're on a road trip, you know. A lot of the egos and attitudes have disintegrated a little bit, and they're starting to, you know, gel a little bit. So I like the show.
well,
This episode.
and Poise, you must have been happy when all the power went out on the ship and they couldn't make any more emergency hologram Rioses.
I thanked Christ for that.
So let's talk about this this planetary defense system that they have, these orchids that seem to be able to bring down everything from a freighter to a Borg cube. Do we think this is going to be enough, or are the Romulans going to show up and have any chance at taking out these synths in their homeworld? Vanya, what do you think?
I think that the Romulans will definitely give them a run for their money. It just depends on what this thing is that Sutra thinks from the admonished that thing.
Yeah.
She mind melded it. It just, if that's true, if there are other synths that are even higher being than the synths that are on the planet, we don't know what that is. So, you know, otherwise, if that didn't exist, that possibility didn't exist, then the Romulans would have totally, like, just run all over them, you know?
Now, do we feel like now that we know the admonishment is built for synthetic life to understand it, as opposed to organic life to be driven mad by it?
Right.
Vanya, do you think the Takan Empire were a bunch of synths, or are we dealing with an entirely different empire in your mind?
I think that they were maybe synths all along, you know? It's like, my concern is that we're getting into like Battlestar Galactica territory,
Yeah.
where it's like everything that has happened before will happen again. So it's like organic people have already done this. We've already created synths who have taken over. Then we somehow existed and then made more synths, you know? And it's been this circular motion.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that wacky mid-season finale on Battlestar Galactica when they found a planet that they thought was Earth, and it was the 13th colony, and on that planet, all life had been wiped out by Cylons, because they had done this all before, long, long, long ago.
Yeah, and then we're about to do it again, you know what I mean? And so I feel like, is that what they're trying to do on Picard? Because I just feel like between Star Trek and the reboot of Battlestar Galactica is really close. I mean, Ronald D. Moore worked on TNG, he worked on DS9, you know? And then he did this other show. It's like, if there's such a close connection, you would think you would be like, if you're, you know, show running or running that show, you'd be like, oh, I have this idea that this has already happened again before, and that, you know, humans or organics have created, you know, since before and then been destroyed by them. Somebody would say, yeah, but there's a show like that already.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from the beginning, the vibe I got from the show was that it's basically Battlestar Galactica and Westworld with a sprinkling of Star Trek on top of it for flavor.
Huh.
You know, and I think that's really where we're heading into. We're heading into Westworld territory, and we've already sort of established Battlestar Galactica territory, and it sort of feels like this is what they're going for. You know.
I hope that it's not the same sort of scenario, because then I feel like then Star Trek is taking a step backwards, right?
Yeah.
They're actually going backwards.
Yeah, where it's just copying somebody else, which.
Yeah. I feel like there are other like themes within this show that are already so connected. Like the whole theme of death in Picard is, you know, and how that's connected to living is already part of this whole storytelling process, which is very much Battlestar Galactica, you know. And I don't want to all keep bringing that up, but they're kind of doing it to themselves.
Yeah, it's true.
I really can't help but connect the two.
Now, Poise, did you feel like when Seven and Elnor got to interact with Picard and say that last goodbye, did it feel to you like it was a true last goodbye?
Nope.
No? You're expecting them to come back in the next episode or the next season?
Oh, next season.
Okay. Would either of you be interested in an Elnor and Seven buddy cop series where the two of them travel through space together?
I would not,
No.
sir.
Okay, because those two together just make me so happy. I would watch that all day. They do.
I would like to see them connect within a show, like Picard,
Yeah.
if it was done differently. But I don't need to see them on their own. I don't think.
No.
Okay, so it's just me.
I would watch a 7 of 9 and a Soji show.
Oh, yeah?
You know, I would watch that before I watch Elnor and 7 of 9.
Well, you really enjoy Issa Briones in this show. You're enjoying Soji. And what did you think?
And I think part of it has to do with her performance. For the first couple episodes, I was like, eh. But now I'm like hooked on Soji and what she's doing and what she wants to find out about herself.
And what did
by
you
the way,
think of
did
her?
get your planet of boomers, sort of. You got an extra boomer.
We did. Well, what did you think of the extra boomer? What did you think of Sutra, the only other sister like her that has lost her pair? Did you enjoy her performance as this more Data-like android?
Sure, I did. I totally did. I wasn't sure that the only tricky thing was I wasn't sure that I believed that an android could just mind meld just because they took some night school courses and they just everybody can mind meld now. You just got to read a couple of books and you're good to go. You know. I feel like it should inherently be something that Vulcans do, or somehow it has to be part of your physical makeup that you can do it because you're born with that ability as well as learning it somehow, as opposed to just sort of reading a couple of books.
Well, what do you think, Vanya?
I feel like I don't know. I don't know that I believe that. I felt like mind melding is an organic thing. Is that racist? I felt like that's not. I don't know that that's even possible. I don't know how that's even possible.
Yeah, it's a bit like plugging in a Macintosh hard drive to a Windows computer. I just don't think they communicate.
I felt like for a synthetic person to do it, they would actually have to physically deeply get into you to do it,
Right.
Or with another synth, right? But I just felt like that's an organic kind of performance to me, and I was not really convinced of how that could work.
I
It was
wasn't
just kind of
buying that.
it's
I
gonna
may
work
buy that a human could do it, maybe, but I don't buy
That's
that
what I mean.
an
I feel
organic,
like it's
a
organic.
synthetic can do it. I think it's just way too many steps removed.
Yeah, I really feel like the information held inside of this admonishment is being used by the writers and shuttled along from Commodore O into Agnes Girardi and now into Sutra in ways that just don't connect. This doesn't work.
I will say, I will agree, about, I wanted to go back to, Sutra and Soji, that I think that her, particularly in this episode, I thought that I really liked Soji in this episode, because she wasn't dumb, she was like, oh yeah, I slept with this guy, he was my lover, but I'm not going to trust him, and I thought that was really...
Well,
real.
I was so worried.
Where with Girardi, everybody's
that scene got me so tense. When Soji is speaking with this guy,
with Narek?
guy, and I was like, oh God, please, writers, please don't let her get suckered by this guy and say, okay,
and
he loves me. I was like, I was going to lose. I would have stopped watching the show. If that had happened, I swear to God, I would have stopped and be done with this. And I'm so glad that didn't happen.
And Vanya?
She was like, you're an asshole. I'm done with you.
I'll just wait.
And what did you think, Vanya?
I really appreciated that she didn't get sucked in. I really appreciated that she was cautious. And because I feel like they're all walking around with Girardi, Agnes, who's a freaking murderer.
Yep.
And they're all cool with it,
Yeah.
And the person that's being the nicest to Raffi is Soji, and I feel like she's like Soji's like, she understands, that everybody's cool with Girardi, but she's also like seems to be cautious about anybody.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. I thought that the character did a lot of smart things in the episode. Though I will say, I don't like these reveals that are so obvious to the audience. Like, they're supposed to be trying to surprise us.
Yeah.
But I feel like people are surprised in the episode, and we're supposed to be okay with the people in the episode that are surprised.
Yeah, characters being surprised is no substitute for actually surprising the audience.
Yeah, and they did the same thing in Discovery. In Discovery, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Like where the surprise was always for the people, the characters on the show.
Yeah.
But it should be for us. We're the ones who are watching the episode.
Yeah.
And so when Picard is with and Sutra comes in behind Picard and he says, "Of course," and I was like, "Well, okay, that's Gianna's double, right?"
Yeah.
Because we know that they come in twins, right? So, yeah, odds are her twin is probably there, and so I wasn't surprised by that, but I think that was supposed to be some big reveal. Because it was like her back, and then she walked up, and we're supposed to be like,
yeah.
Oh. And I'm like, but that's for them, not for us.
Yeah.
We know that already.
Now, what did you think about, in retrospect, the fact that Rios was surprised that Jana was a synth? Since if she's the double of Sutra, she had exactly Data's coloring and appearance. Like, should Rios not maybe have known, probably, that this was a synth the moment this gold-skinned person showed up on the... Yeah, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's not just him. I feel like there's so many characters that, like, on the show that don't know things, just that are so obvious to them. There was that scene from the last episode where Raffi was, like, talking to hologram, and she didn't know for so long that it wasn't Rios. And I was like, but how could you not know that? And then when Rios is surprised about Sutra, I was like, but you should know this by now. Like, you know that she looks exactly like Soji. You know what I mean? You know about the story now. Like, why are you surprised? So these surprises are really frustrating for, like, supposedly, like, very intelligent people.
Yeah.
And then also there's no surprises for us as the audience.
Yeah, and I feel like we're being given these things that we're supposed to consider wondrous and science fiction amazing without really being given the science behind it to feel like it's plausible. This essentially this sight gag of we're going to hire a bunch of actors who are twins so that we can make two of everybody except for our main actress who we have done some Orphan Black special effects on. But for the most part, this was just a bunch of twins. Do you guys feel like there was enough buy-in at the beginning of this show of they always come in pairs to justify this sight gag happening right now?
Well, I mean, it makes sense because of Data lore.
But it's Data lore and B4.
And B4, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it almost works.
There's also another Data on every planet in the galaxy. There was another one on that planet too.
I don't know. I feel like this is definitely like sci-fi 101. So it's like if you've been watching science fiction your entire life, and reading science fiction your entire life, this show is like beginners.
Yeah.
But it's not even
I think I would agree with that assessment. I think that's what's a little frustrating about it, because it's like, I sort of know, I know where this is going. I've felt this before. I've seen it before. I've seen some version of it before in a book or in a show or in a, we've all three of us have seen that at some point over the last 20-something years, and so I think that's probably, it sort of feels a little wheezy at times.
And, when we're watching the Orville and 3 out of 13 episodes feel very derivative, but the other 10 episodes are doing something different and interesting. They have 13 plots to diversify their storytelling portfolio, whereas this is one plot in a 10-part series, and if the through line of it is a little bit too Dune and a little bit too Battlestar Galactica, your whole season is derivative, and that hurts.
I would say that I don't mind when things are repeated. I don't think that everything has to be completely original, but I just feel like there's enough in the Star Trek canon to make things that are like derivative or a repeat more interesting, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like when you go in to tell a story about the Borg, and like nobody has ever made in any other versions of science fiction something that so closely resembles the Borg, because the Borg are so signature. It would be foolish to try to tell a techno-zombie storyline. And Star Trek invented that. So it feels like they did something beautiful with the Borg in this season, and that's kind of the only thing all season long that feels new.
Well, they also expanded on what Romulans are to, like, Star Trek. Like, they gave them more. We found out more about because they were kind of mysterious and, you know, shady and underhanded, and we found out, like, more about why that might be.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, they're an alien, they're a race that we know in Star Trek, and it was kind of fun to be like, peel away at them a bit.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good too, because I like when they play with things that already exist and we know about. You know, I'm not saying everything has to be perfectly original. I just feel like it needs to be executed better.
And there's a real line that needs to be walked of doing something with a recognizable alien race, a recognizable piece of Star Trek intellectual property, and giving us something new about it. Like what they've done with the Romulans and the Borg in this have been fascinating. Contrast that with the massive missteps that Discovery had with the Klingons, where they decided Klingons need to look drastically different than they canonically do, that their ships have to be different, that all these things that we know to be true are now completely changed. I feel like Picard has learned... Yeah, I know you didn't like them. But I feel like Picard has learned a couple of those things. But the general through line of the line of the story in the entire season has the same kind of like confusing, tripping over itself, clumsy choices that we were seeing in Discovery.
You know what the biggest misstep I find in the show is, and like Poise has talked about it a lot, is that the main character, who the show's like
named after
is only a fraction of himself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might be the biggest misstep. Because in this episode was the first time, like, it really hit me that I was like, that I thought, oh, a character that I've been watching and loving since I was 8 years old is not really the same character. Like, there's this whole show wrapped around him, and he's kind of...
That's right.
He's not the same, you know?
As I said, like, way back when, is the naming the show Picard, I think, was a terrible idea. I mean, I don't think there's been a Star Trek show that's been named after a person yet. Enterprise, Next Generation, Deep Space, call it something that suggests anything can happen. Ensemble cast,
Yeah, they tend to be named after a ship.
It's really an afterthought. It wasn't necessarily the way to go.
Yeah. Well, and Discovery had problems in that it was named after the ship, and you didn't see it for 3 hours. And so that was a bit of a problem. So there have been issues with naming things in the past, but they sort of got into a recognizable groove of naming Deep Space Nine after the station they're on, Voyager after the ship they're on, and the thing they're doing. Enterprise, named after not just the ship they're on, but a name that has more meaning for the audience than it does yet for the crew. Discovery is an abstract thought as well, and it was something that show never really did. It discovered nothing, and that was really kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, because it's a science vessel, right?
Yeah, you should be discovering something, as opposed to this thing you discovered off screen before the show began.
Right.
So that was a strange thing about Discovery.
But you know what's interesting? I realized as I was watching this episode, there's three things that Star Trek needs to have to make it Star Trek, and that is philosophical discussions about humanity, awe, and adventure.
Well, and this episode did give us a serving of all three of those things.
It did.
Yes.
That's why I think it trekked it, and I enjoyed this episode.
Oh, spoiler alert! Poise thinks it trekked it.
Already?
Before we even get into whether it trekked it or wrecked it, I want to talk about the fact that we got a new Soong that we have never been told of before. Alton Inigo Soong, which I'm a big fan of any time we can have Brent Spiner in Star Trek and he gets to not be pretending to be an immortal 30-year-old robot because he's a man in his 60s, so he should probably, look like that. I loved that on Enterprise.
He can create any character he wants now. He has the freedom to do whatever the hell he wants now.
Yeah, and he got to be a Soong on Enterprise, and I loved it because...
And he was great.
Yeah, he was wonderful as a precursor to the Nunyan Soong that we were going to see. It was a really cool opportunity to get to play with him not pretending to be ageless. And Poise, what did you think about Data's biological brother, basically?
Well, let me tell you something. From the beginning, I knew before the show ended that we would have some version of Data back before episode 10.
Yeah.
Whether they reactivated before, or they had some sort of flashback scenes, even that wouldn't have been good. Even if there was a hologram version of it, Brent Spiner would have to be in the show. Because Next Generation is largely about Data. I mean, Data is central to that whole show.
Yeah.
Right? Data, Picard, they're sort of actually on the same tier. So you had to find a way of getting that guy back in. You had to. So I was happy to have him in there, and I'm happy to see where this character goes. I hope to God, though, they don't kill him in episode 10. I don't like this thing you bring somebody back for an episode or two and they're dead. No, just keep them.
Don't worry, I'm sure there's another Soong brother out there somewhere.
On some other planet.
As soon as they need another one, they'll have another one. Vanya, what did you think about getting to meet a new Soong?
Well, I love Brent Spiner, and I thought that was great. And I like that he was very different from the other Soongs, or any, iteration of what. I really did think that there would be some sort of Data that would come back. I thought it was going to be like a bad, kind of like a lore type, which Sutra is actually kind of.
Yeah.
But I did like that the character at least tried to tell Agnes that she sucked. That she fucked up, that she's
Thank God.
A terrible person, just even for a second. So that was helpful to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked having him there. I thought he didn't take away from anything for sure. Like him being there wasn't a weakness of the episode by any stretch.
Now,
so that's good.
He seems to be working on some kind of golem, some sort of robotic body. Do you think that is a robotic body for him, or are we going to get Maddox back?
I couldn't figure that out. For a second, I was like, there was a moment there where I was like, oh, it's Maddox, another Maddox, because he lost somebody. But then I was like, maybe he's making that for himself to make sure that he because Soongs are very egotistical, right?
Yes, and they're interested in the things they can do for immortality.
And they like them. Yeah, they like themselves.
You know what's probably going to happen? He's going to make another Data, and it's going to be an excuse to have an older-looking Data in his 60s, and he's going to get killed either in the next episode or the one after, and this Data is going to be activated, and we're going to have a new android.
Well, that would be an interesting way to handle the age problem. And that's the biggest problem with Data, because when you got into the movies, you could really tell that they didn't have the technology in the late 90s and early 2000s to make a younger looking Data, even with a movie budget. And so killing him in the early 2000s was a good move, because if they kept him alive for another movie, if they were somehow able to get a Star Trek 11, it just would have, the illusion was falling away of this immortal humanoid. But like you said, Poise, this is an opportunity to, if they want to, make a
brand new one,
a brand new 60-ish android.
I mean, if I were him, I probably wouldn't want to work on it with Girardi, because she would probably just make it Bruce Maddox, because she's terrible and she would just take it over.
Yep.
She might kill him. I don't know why anyone is like not thinking she might kill me.
Yeah.
I can't understand that either. She's a murderer who's been brainwashed.
Yeah.
She's an agent, and she's walking around just sort of freely, and it's all good. You don't know what else she can do. You don't know what else can trigger her to go slaughter a bunch of, synthetics. We don't know.
Yeah.
But she's just there having tea.
When he passed out, they left her.
That's right, Vanya.
They left him in a room with a killer. Like, listen, like, even if she didn't choose to do it, that's a problem.
Yeah,
right?
She's capable of doing it.
Yeah, she did it, and this is somebody that was her lover, right? So even if she didn't choose and it was all like out of her control, that means she's out of control, and that you have to keep an eye on her.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
well, not even just keep an eye on her. She should be in the break.
Yes.
Like, she should be in the break with that Romulan dude locked up. And when we're done with this mission, we're going to bring you back on the ship. But you should be locked up, because this is a planet of synthetics. You want to kill all of them. So
I'm really over the cuteness, the whole, like, am I not going to jail anymore?
Yeah.
Like, and the whole, like, Rios being worried about her.
Yeah. Are you guys buying this, like, Rios Agnes romance?
And the whole thing about her not being, he's like, oh, you're not the one thing you are is forgettable. I mean, okay, so in all the things that we've talked about, like, about Agnes, right? We know she's a killer and all that. But they always talk about how she's this great genius and she's, worked on these synthetic things and it's her life's work. We have not seen any example of her genius.
No.
She could be a total grifter. Like, I don't... like,
could be. But she's a killer with a heart of gold.
Now we should have seen some sort of, level of genius.
Yeah, it's a bit weird that it's...
Just keep talking about it?
It's just in her biography, and it is not on display at any time.
And everybody just accepts it, and everybody's all cool with that. I mean...
Airlock.
I'm sure, I guess. Like, we don't even know if she's who she is. We don't even know if that's the actual Agnes Girardi.
Because nobody let Raffi do an actual security search.
Oh, that's done and gone. And then Raffi Picard thing, I don't know what you want to talk about next, Matt. But
let's talk about that. Yes, this "I love you, JL" moment, like.
Okay, but my biggest problem with that whole discussion was when she said, "You've done so much for me." What the fuck has he done?
I know.
Part of my language.
Yeah.
What has he done for her? And that's when it really hit me.
What can he do for you exactly?
Yeah.
When it really hit me that Picard isn't actually Picard, because when she said, "Look at for everything you've done for me," I thought he was going to say to her, "No, it's everything you've done for me."
Right.
On this mission. Mission, everything you've done, because really all we know is that he left her high and dry after he resigned and she got fired. And so everything that's happened between them since has been her giving and giving to him, and yet she's thanking him and telling him he's, and he doesn't say anything, and she says, "I love you," and he
that was my least favorite part of the entire freaking episode.
Yeah.
The everything you've done for me.
Guys,
I hated it because it doesn't mean anything. Everything like what?
Yeah, there's a real problem with this show where it feels like certain important writers haven't watched Star Trek, and yet it feels like writers on this series haven't watched this series. Like,
yeah, I don't understand, because how could they think that he's done all this stuff for her?
Right?
Like,
But
I don't understand that.
Because maybe the
So they haven't
individual
even
writers
watched the
are working in a
episodes.
vacuum. and they didn't see the previous scripts or the previous episodes.
Which is exactly what you want when you're making a story arc season.
Listen, I don't want to say this, but it's like, man, they just did her dirty.
Yep.
That entire show. Because there's only one episode left, and I don't see them having any time to make it better for her.
No, I assume the last episode is going to be about Sutra and Soong and Picard and maybe a bit of Jurati, but Soji is going to be front and center with this, where she has to make her choice. And it's interesting the way Picard had that moment to be the great orator and tell everyone about how he's going to protect them and how he'll be their voice with the Federation, even though we know the Federation doesn't particularly like him. And he tried this last time with people who hadn't recently slaughtered the Federation, and it didn't work. So it felt like Picard didn't know who Picard was.
You know what? The next episode is going to have Soji fighting with this other woman.
Soji versus Sutra?
To the death, while there's a space battle happening up ahead. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some fighting. That's for sure.
There's going to be fighting and punching.
Yep.
In this episode, it looked like Soji was on the side of the synthetics. We know that's not the case. She's just sort of, playing the thing, and then she's going to come out in the next episode, and she's going to sort of join Picard and his merry crew. And
I don't know that I completely agree with that reading of it. I think Soji is confused and torn between two different families that she's only just come to realize exist, really.
I don't think so.
I agree.
I think the feelings she has for her family of synths, they keep washing over her as new memories that are being unlocked. But that's got to feel kind of similar to this group of people that have been helping you for, I don't know, a week at this point, maybe a few days.
Right.
Like, all of these people have got to feel pretty new to her. And for her to decide between saving the life of some synths or not wiping out sentient life in the galaxy, it kind of seems like she's just going to have a crisis of conscience, and that's what episode 10 is going to be about.
You know what Vanya mentioned two episodes ago about chosen family?
Yep.
I think that's what it's going to boil down to in this next episode. And her chosen family is the people that she spent time with on that ship, and she's sort of gotten to know, and the people who are fighting for her, and she's going to make that choice. And it's going to be a no-brainer, and that's episode 10.
Yeah, I think that tracks. I also feel like they're just about out of runway to explain how any of this has happened. That's one of the things that sort of chaps my ass about this show. They've got a bit of Star Wars sequelitis going on here, where they're just sort of showing us a bunch of stuff that is happening now, and assuming that we're going to be okay with not knowing how Maddox figured any of this out, where he and Soong hooked up to start doing that. Like, there's a whole bunch of backstory and explanation necessary to buy any of this, and I don't think episode 10 is going to be interested in that.
You know, Matt, I totally agree. I could not stop thinking about that. How that all started, and even how they really know what his intentions were.
Mm-hmm.
Because his intentions weren't even that clear. But there's all this speculation about what his true intentions were.
Yeah.
And talking about his deception and his ego, and I'm like, but that wasn't even spelled out properly.
No.
So for all the surprising and kind of things that they're trying to do, they keep trying to do that without explaining the actual stuff. So there's a lot of talking and not showing, but then when they do talk, they don't tell us anything.
No, they don't tell us the things we want to know. They
Right?
repeat things they've already told us, and they repeat things to each other that the audience already knows. I feel like there's precious little running time left.
And they have all these flashbacks that we had to endure for episode after episode until they stopped doing them, And then they do flashbacks in this episode, and they don't do any Maddox flashbacks.
Yep.
Like, they have the power to do all that, and then there's all these pockets and holes in how Maddox did all this stuff and what his real true intentions were.
Yeah.
And they didn't give us anything.
Nope. Okay.
You know who's on the ball again this episode, though? Russo. He was on the ball again.
Yes, the music hits were good.
Yeah.
The music hits were good.
709, Voyager.
Yep.
Did you hear that?
Yes. So good.
That was really nice.
Yeah, well, at least, if nothing else, we're getting a good soundtrack out of the deal. Now, I want to talk about, you guys can't quite see it, but I've switched the lighting scheme. We are now trekking and wrecking. Poist, you sort of gave us a preview of how you feel about it, so let's go into... It had the 3 ingredients, this episode, that made it into Star Trek. Is that your angle on this?
Agreed, yeah.
All right. No
further humanity.
Yeah.
Wonder and adventure.
All right. Cool. Yeah, I mean, this did play in the philosophy of the needs of the many and the needs of the few. It played in the philosophy. It played in some philosophy here on what makes a creature alive. What makes sentience. Yes. Vanya, what about you? Did this trek it or wreck it?
It trekked it. It was fine. It trekked it because of those things. Yeah. I think we're as far as it trekking it because of Picard, it didn't. You know what I mean? Like on that, like as far as him as like a canonical like character, it didn't. If it was going to be based on that, but yeah, sure. With all that stuff, sure.
Yeah, I've got to agree. This is like a sloppy, lazy trek. Where
for sure.
Yeah, where you've got a Borg cube, you've got some Romulan warbirds. They're called warbirds again, but they, in 20 years, sure, come up with a new design, I guess.
And a nice attempt at talking about like the philosophy and idealistic qualities of Star Trek.
Yep.
Right.
Like, Picard's definitely quixotic.
Yeah.
That was shown again in his speech that he did.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was frustrated with the idea that he said when Soji had a lot of good questions for him and a lot of things I thought on her end it seemed like she understood what she was questioning in herself.
Yeah.
When she was saying how to sacrifice, the logic of sacrifice.
Yes.
And then he said, and I think this is one of the most important conversations, but they kind of swept over it real fast. He says he didn't like that. He didn't like the idea of that.
Yeah.
Questioning the logic of sacrifice. But when you look at Star Trek, that's what Spock did. That's what Vulcans do.
That's what Data did.
That's what Data did.
Yeah.
Right? So when he says, I don't know if I like that, I'm like, but you've actually benefited from that way of thinking. So
yeah.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Or the one.
Yeah.
You've actually benefited from the logic of sacrifice.
Well, and it also feels like, assuming that the writers are on board with this having happened and are aware of this, it feels like the writers failed to show that this is Picard's trauma, saying that he's not okay with this talk of sacrifice. There would have been a way to deliver that where you realized that he was... I mean, television is hard to show what someone's thinking, but this is one of the greatest living actors. So if you're going to ask anybody to do it, ask him.
Well, yeah, that has changed inside of him. You know what I mean? That way of thinking has changed.
Yeah.
But we've seen it in Star Trek time and time again that has happened since Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, where does that, like, what, you're undercutting, like Spock as a Vulcan? That was his, one of the most important seasons of Star Trek, which is, like, basically what she's saying, unless they mean something else and I got it wrong. But to me, I think that's what she was saying.
Yeah.
And that's what she thought Girardi was saying.
I think so.
And isn't that the same as feeling like you have no choice? I just felt like that was a very sloppy conversation.
Yeah.
On his end. On his end. On her end, it made sense.
Yeah, it did. It felt like it wasn't the right reaction for the Picard of The Next Generation or the right reaction for the Picard of Star Trek Picard. Like, those words didn't feel right coming out of his mouth at all.
Yeah, and he could have said, I understand that, and that's what I would have thought, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But these are the other factors.
Yeah.
that make that different, and that logic doesn't allow you to think outside the box, kind of thing.
Yep.
And so for this, it's different. That would have been, to me, that would have made sense. But he kind of just dismissed her.
Yeah. Well, if Picard is good at anything in this series, it's dismissing women.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of the thing he does.
Even the ones that have his back.
Yeah. He's kind of dismissing everybody. But I'm feeling it mostly in the way he dismisses Raffi and the way he immediately dismisses the actions of Agnes and is now dismissing the only woman he's interacted with that he didn't dismiss was Troy, because he's like torn a new one to the Admiral, much to his detriment. But yeah, it feels like he just treats everybody like they're disposable and they're there for his use.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that's not Picard.
No.
So hang on a second.
Yeah?
I just realized something. All Good Things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that character, Picard, that character in All Good Things? Who he was at that age he was playing in 1994, he's playing who he is now.
Yeah.
In Picard. He's playing the age that he is now.
Yep.
And he was short-tempered, he was dismissive, he was irrational in All Good Things. So if we think about it, it's actually not so far off from this erratic and sort of,
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but...
guy with a poor judgment. That's what was going on in All Good Things. That's who he is now, in a sense. You know what I mean?
At the same time, in All Good Things, is that we find out that he goes back, he gets the chance to go back and be a different person, right? So we see what the outcome could be, but he actually tries to reset that. And also, I went back and I watched Tapestry.
Yeah.
Where he gets to go back and think differently about how he can use his bravado, his ego, to not be that person, just do it in a different way. Like, he could still have ego, he can still be, the top of the chain, but he can also be compassionate, he doesn't have to be cold, he doesn't have to, do those things. And so he actually learns something at the end of All Good Things.
He does,
learns that he
but
was
I'm saying that
way,
in this timeline, he's probably grown into the asshole that he was in All Good Things.
Although
he was dismissive of Beverly in All Good Things. Why can't I do this? Give me my ship. I gotta,
Yeah, but
that guy.
You have to think about
it's
the
sort
end
of this guy, a little bit.
Yeah, and I think Vanya's right that there was a journey in that two-parter where by the end of it he had learned something. But there was also the fact that he had a genuinely insane experience happening to him, and every time he tried to describe it, everyone thought he was insane, so he was being dismissed in a different way in his older years than he is now as in Star Trek Picard. But
now, I can't remember how All Good Things ended. Did he retain the knowledge of everything that had happened, or did he forget it?
Oh, I remember him retaining it, Vanya.
No, he retains it.
Yeah.
He retains everything that happened in the back and forth in time. He remembered everything at the end of it.
Because he retains it. That's why I'm saying that I don't think that he should be that he knows what it's like if he doesn't, if he's just an asshole.
Yeah, and he's become an old curmudgeon several times over the course of the Next Generation, whether it was the Inner Light or it was All Good Things, and he learns in all of these, and yet when he actually becomes an old curmudgeon for us, he has learned nothing by this point. He's retained none of those lessons.
This is somebody who we know as to be wise, right? What does Data says? Like, there's the difference between knowledge and wisdom is experience.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, and to Star Trek, really, Picard is like the pinnacle of that, and that's kind of, even in this episode when she touches his face and she says grief and endurance.
Yeah.
It's not just endurance, it's experience that he should be putting into place as wisdom.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem that wise.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to the character that Patrick Stewart wanted to play. And I think a lot of it is, again, because he liked what Hugh Jackman got to do in Logan.
I think so.
This doesn't feel like where Picard would have ended up. It doesn't feel like where Professor X even would have ended up. It feels like he's made some other character in order to make it into an acting exercise he would enjoy.
Well, I mean, when you do the French thing, that little sort of, pantomime that he was doing this French villain thing when they go to the planets.
Yes.
I mean, whose choice is that?
I mean, that's quite silly.
Is that a writing thing that Picard say, hey, it would be great for me to do a French accent and be really sort of uber villain? And,
which is bizarre because when he's Dixon Hill or Robin Hood, he's still just regular Captain Picard in a different outfit.
Right. I just find, like, I don't need him to be... He could have been looser. He could have been not as uptight. I just feel like he should also be quite wise. And I feel like there are times in this show where they're trying to play him off like he's being quite very wise. Like when he's talking to Girardi, or when he's saying how, I don't think of me as like a dying man and blah, blah, blah. And we're supposed to... Or when he's making his speeches.
Right.
But the speeches aren't even sticking. They're not even having any impact really on me. And, like, I consider Michael Chabon to be an incredible writer. He's written one of my favorite books on the planet that I've ever read in my entire life. And yet, when these speeches are being made, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, Star Trek hasn't been great at speeches since Ronald D. Moore left. I remember that one moment in Enterprise when, it was the finale, because Riker and Troy were watching it in the holosuite. And
one of the greatest. Yeah,
they were like, well, and this is when Captain Archer delivers the speech that builds the Federation, so let's cut away and not listen to that. And you're like, but Rick Berman, Brennan Braga, this is your chance to prove you can write before you shut down this show, this series, for 15 years.
Like this most backhanded way possible.
It's such an undercut. But yeah, I feel like there's just a lack of inspirational wisdom coming out of the font of brilliance that always had something to say in TNG.
And I honestly think, listen, for lack of a better term, I don't want to like yuck anybody else's yum, and everybody deserves their Star Trek and the thing that makes them love Star Trek. And I'm all about anybody loving Star Trek, even if you come to it. If you're like, oh, I've only ever watched Discovery and you love Star Trek, I'm all for that. But particularly if it makes you watch older episodes. But still, and I'm always for more Star Trek. But come on, like, this is like one of the most beloved characters in the whole entire canon.
Yeah.
There's so much to pull from for him. He has so much screen time, like, there had to have been something better to be done with that.
Yeah.
I think what I also appreciated at the end of, or during this episode, is that everybody for a minute sort of put their baggage aside. And it was like, you know what, we have bigger things to deal with, for Christ's sake. Right? The Romulans are coming, we're all going to die. Let's just stop our whining for a minute, and let's just focus on just being a team.
Yeah, I gotta say, the characters felt more like they belonged in Star Trek than they had in a long time.
That's right.
That's true.
Totally.
I would say,
for the first
agree
time,
with that.
it felt like, okay, this is kind of a crew.
Yeah.
Or a team. They weren't ideal, but at least they were like, they had the same sort of focus, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Agnes is the exception.
Agnes feels like a guest star in every episode.
She does.
Whereas the rest of them feel like a crew.
Yeah.
And you know what? They actually do feel like a crew. You know what's also terrible about Agnes? Apparently, because I apparently have the one woman, like, I hate Agnes. But I hate's a strong word. But, like, I dislike the character because also she just portrayed them again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like, Picard's like, but Agnes, and he's surprised. But I'm
Yeah.
like, you're talking to the killer, remember?
Yeah. This woman has her own motivations, and sometimes they've been implanted by a half Romulan, and sometimes she's just being an asshole.
But that's
right.
Yeah, I've been saying since the beginning. When we kept questioning what had happened to her, you know, and I kept thinking, and I kept saying, but maybe she's just bad. Remember, I kept saying, maybe she's just a horrible person.
Yeah. And it turns
out.
out.
I also don't buy that everybody on that planet wouldn't just kill Agnes on sight for killing their dad. You know, I just don't buy that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or at the very least, putting her in
Arcadia
prison
is
instantly.
like a utopia, right?
What are you talking to her for? Like, she murdered him in cold blood. She planned that, premeditated.
Yeah, although I again, from none of these synths, I didn't get the impression that they all deeply loved Maddox. They all seem to like Soong, but only because he's standing there. I don't really get the impression that there was a deep connection to any organics that last beyond when the person walks out of the room.
Right, but then we don't know what they feel, like how they feel. We don't know what their level of like programming is.
Yeah. Well, maybe in the 10th episode we will learn more about that, or maybe this planet gets destroyed and season 2 is about something different. Poise, what do you think? Are we just going to have this storyline stretched out across 3 seasons, or do you think we're going to get some closure in episode 10?
I don't know, actually.
What about you, Vanya? Do you have an instinct on which way they're going to go?
I think
I do have a feeling that
part of it.
Oh, hold on. Go ahead, Vanya.
So I think maybe part of it might be resolved.
Yeah.
You know, when they do like a partial resolve, and then the other, no, like maybe, some things are resolved, and then other things aren't, that are hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like we'll have like half of it or something.
And what do you think, Poise?
Well, I do know that Soji's gonna, fight on the side of the Angels, and she's gonna end up fighting for Picard and crew. She's gonna end up killing her sister. That sister will die. I think the Romulan woman, Romulannister, is gonna come. You know what? Actually, she's gonna die. Romulannister's sister is gonna die.
Interesting.
And maybe also Soji's sister. Hard to tell.
Now, do you guys think they're leaving Beautiful Flower and Beautiful Flower's twin as something they're going to tease for the next season? Because it doesn't seem like we've met Beautiful Flower's twin.
Yeah, I think so. Or I don't know if it'll be for the next season, but you know what would be ideal for me, and I know people would probably hate this, but like if Soji like sacrificed herself, because isn't that what we're headed towards?
Seems that way.
Like, really she should do the same thing that Data did.
Yeah.
And the fact that we talk about death, like the whole series really is about like humanity and death.
Yeah.
Right? Because even like I read about the title is something like even in the translations, like even in Arcadia, there I am, meaning I am is death.
Right.
And so I'm just like, I feel like somebody important should have to sacrifice himself. Obviously, it can't be Picard.
Agreed.
He's named after it. But
it better not be Raffi.
I was just thinking that Raffi takes a bullet for Picard.
You know what?
And he dies in her arms.
At this point, I'm like,
shoot
fine,
the TV.
do whatever, because you don't care about that character anyway.
It kind of seems that way. Oh.
Right? I'm just kind of like, whatever.
Well, I'd say...
After all the fighting.
I think my prediction for the next episode is that Sutra... I don't think Sutra's going to die. I think she's going to become our new lore. I think she'll continue to be a villain throughout the series. I don't think they're going to successfully contact the synth gods, and I think they're going to stretch that storyline into the 3 seasons that they're working on. And I think they're going to somehow tie Beautiful Flower into that, because I gotta think they're putting this effort into something. Like, why would they even have that character exist in the flashback story that Rios tells if he doesn't factor in some way? Otherwise, I gotta think the writers are better than that. So that's my prediction. I don't think we're going to successfully contact the synths, and I think we're gonna wind up with a pretty pitched battle in space. But I agree, the Romulannisters, I think Narek and his sister might go down together, disagreeing about something.
They're gonna get,
Do you
hit
think
by a
there's-
bunch of falling rocks.
Under a
Do you think
castle.
There's gonna be like
That's what's
like
gonna
a
happen.
main character, like one of the crew, like the main La Sienna crew. Like, you think there's gonna be a sacrifice there?
Oh, I hope not. I don't want to sacrifice a character from the crew. I mean, I wouldn't.
How about Girardi?
I wouldn't
Girardi?
mind. Yeah, I mean, I don't really consider her part of the crew, but I guess I'd like to think Girardi is going to finish whatever work she's doing with Soong, so that she can die, and that maybe gives her the redemption. Like, I think the sacrifice might happen on her part after she finishes her work, but I don't know if they've got enough runway for that. I don't know if one episode is going to be enough to complete her work and then also get her redemption. So,
Right.
I mean, I'd like to think that they could squeeze that in, but they haven't been particularly efficient so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, are we ready to call the ball? And that'll do
Yeah.
it for this episode. Part 2 is next week, and unless the phage finally subsides in a week, we're probably going to be shooting it like this again. I'm hoping it sounds good. I'm hoping it looks good. I'm hoping you guys watching get a kick out of this one way or another. So let us know what you think. Let us know what you're predicting. We are very excited to see whether any of us are right. And also, they have yet to announce when Discovery is going to be kicking off, so we might be Star Trek-less 2 weeks from now.
Oh yeah, they're behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
What if
post-production.
there's a crossover with Discovery and Picard?
Oh my
What if
God.
they go into the future and you freaking see the Enterprise there?
Well, if
Comes
season
face to
3
face.
of Discovery has them dealing with some kind of intergalactic synthetic life form, and this whole multi-generational 1,000-year storyline winds up interacting, I don't know if I'm gonna hate that or love that. Either way, I'm not ready for it.
I would watch it. I'd watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna watch Discovery. I'm hoping that a soft reboot is going to make it a little more enjoyable than the canon-checking, nitpicky Trekkie I am, because I could not enjoy the first 2 seasons of that show. So hopefully season 3 frees my mind enough to enjoy whatever it is they're gonna try to do. I'm hoping.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for this episode. So we will see you next week, and we're looking forward to chatting in the comments. See you then.